Good. All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Betsy Farmer. I'm the Dean of the School of Social Work here at the University of Pittsburgh. And it is a complete honor and thrill to have you all here this afternoon. We are having the pleasure of introducing Dr. Sara Goodkind as the new Philip Hallen Endowed Chair. And we have some folks who are going to introduce both the history of the chair and of Phil and Sara herself. So I won't go into too much detail, but I do want to thank you for joining us. I don't know about the rest of you, but at the moment I need a reason to come together in community and a reason to feel good about something in the world. And this is a truly wonderful thing to feel good about. And so I really appreciate having all of you here. When we're done this afternoon, please, there's some food over here on the edge. Please stick around and chat and just join together with all of us. We love to have you here and look forward to all that's going to transpire in the coming time. So I'm going to turn this over to Mark Nordenberg, who many of you know is the former chancellor of the University of Pittsburgh and now the director of the Institute of Politics and basically just an incredibly wonderful human being. So Mark, would you like to come up and tell us a little bit about the history of this?
Last October, I received an invitation to the big event of the year, maybe even the big event of the century. That is Phil Hallen's 95th birthday party. Fortunately, I was in Boston at the time, committed to another event, so I couldn't be there. But I did yesterday pull out the invitation to that party. It consisted principally of a photograph of a very young Phil Hallen, a photograph of a not so young Phil Hallen, and the following passage, which I was not sure if I should sing or simply recite, but out of respect for you and the Beatles, I think I'll just read it. When I get older, losing my mind, not that long from now, will you be sending me a Valentine? Birthday greetings, hydralazine. If I keep napping past 2:45, would you assume I'm alive? Will you still need me? Please don't delete me when I'm 95. And responding directly to one passage of those Hallen modified Beatle lyrics, for those of us who know Phil, let me just say it would be impossible either to delete him or to delete our knowledge of all of the important and impactful work that he has done from our memories. Phil served as president of the Falk Foundation from 1963 to 2001, nearly a half century. In commenting on his move to philanthropy, he said this: "For me, it turned out to be the first step into a world which saw 5 decades of massive institutional change in our neighborhoods, in our nation, and in the world. A step which gave me my incredibly stimulating work life. It also was the first step into a workshop of ideas, of challenges, of colleagues, and of lifelong friends." In commenting on the creation of the chair that we celebrate today, a chair that bears his name, Phil said, "This endowed chair is the product of one family's 85-year commitment to human rights, civil liberties, anti-discrimination work, and a struggle for the elimination of disparities in today's healthcare system and medical education." Leon Falk Sr. and his brother Maurice Falk were visionary in creating a foundation to specifically examine these issues. The foundation's grant making has long been directed at issues of prejudice and discrimination across the spectrum of the American civil rights landscape, focused on racism, civil rights, disparities in healthcare delivery, minority enrollment in medical schools, gender inequality, and a broad portfolio of grants for LGBTQ issues. The foundation was one of only a few American foundations working almost exclusively on race relations and minority affairs arena. Here are just a few examples of the many philanthropic grants it made. The creation of the first endowed chair in child psychiatry to be held by an African American at the Yale Medical School. The creation of the Falk Fellows in Community Psychiatry at Meharry Medical College and at Pitt, and the creation of Falk Minority Fellowships at the American Psychiatric Association. The production of the first known documentary dealing with the AIDS epidemic. First funding for Alpha House, PERSAD, the Pittsburgh AIDS Task Force, Prevention Point Pittsburgh, the Shady Lane School, and the Hill District Development Fund. And the creation of the Freedom House Ambulance Service, which is getting additional and well-deserved attention as we move into and through Black History Month. An added bonus to funding from the Falk Foundation was that you not only received financial support, but you also received Phil's keen mind and big heart. He has described his approach to fundraising in the following way. In my mind, an actual grant is just one leg of the foundation's partnership with its grantees. Personal time, moral support, discussion, joint planning, and advocacy are the other legs of the grant-making stool. The important piece of trust building is made possible by thinking and working this way. Recognizing that just sharing my own impressions of a force of nature like Phil would be inadequate, I reached out to 3 other people and asked for their perspectives from somewhat different vantage points. Hank Buchema, who led the McCune Foundation and was one of Phil's principal partners, said this: Phil was a master of bringing people together and finding key connections between and among them. Before any meeting started, Phil would begin the process by rearranging the room. Chairs lined up in rows became a circle. Proximity in physical space was the metaphor for the coming discussions that brought people and ideas closer to one another. Jonathan Callard, who taught in our Department of English and who is connected to Phil principally through the Calvary Episcopal Church, said this: Phil is most at his essence up close and person to person. He brings his vision for stronger communities and his compassionate and ingenious heart to any moment. Terry Miller, a distinguished graduate of our School of Social Work, the former director of the Institute of Politics and the founder of the Pennsylvania Organization for Women in Early Recovery, called Phil a trailblazer, quickly adding that there were 2 other words that also described him: mischievous and shenanigans. Continuing, she said, meetings with Phil were never boring. Instead, they always were fun, creating a sense of safety and belonging that opened the way to a shared responsibility and commitment to work together toward a positive outcome, typically for marginalized communities in our home region. A great deal of good, timely, and important work got done under Phil's watch, and our region is far better for it. The respect that Phil enjoyed within the Folk Foundation is reflected in the creation of this chair. It was a comparatively small foundation. The foundation actually suspended its grant making for a period of time so that they could invest the funds here at Pitt to endow this chair. The fact that the chair rotates between the School of Public Health and the School of Social Work is reflective of the priorities that Phil himself had in his work, also reflected then in the priorities of the foundation. It is a cause for celebration that in the normal cycle of things, the chair has now come back to the School of Social Work and is being held by Sara. And I do want to both thank Phil for all that he has done for our community and our country, and to wish Sara the best of everything as she continues to do good work in the name of Phil Hallen. Phil, would you stand up so we can applaud you here? Sara is going to get up and speak, and she is going to be introduced by Kathy Elliott. Kathy?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is a tremendous honor to be here to, first of all, just say congratulations and celebrate not only a colleague, but a friend and a partner in all the work that we've been doing at Gwen's Girls, Dr. Sara Goodkind. I've been tasked with and given the honor to introduce her. And although I'm going to read some things about her in her bio, the words on this paper and what I'm about to say does not truly give the essence of who she is and the work that she has done. So she's going to do a presentation. So hopefully you'll get a glimpse of the great work that she has been doing. Dr. Sara Goodkind is a professor and PhD program director in the School of Social Work at the University of Pittsburgh. Her research focuses on social service programs and systems that work with young people, examining their experiences in educational, child welfare, and juvenile legal systems. Dr. Goodkind's work exposes institutional biases and systemic inequities, tracing young people's pathway through systems and providing evidence and recommendations for systems and policy change. She developed her research interests through her work with youth as a teacher, mentor, and social worker, and she is engaged in collaborative community-engaged research and advocacy aimed at affecting systemic change. Since 2017, Dr. Goodkind has served as co-convener of the Black Girls Equity Alliance Juvenile Justice Action Team. And that is an action team that's within the Black Girls Equity Alliance within Gwen's Girls. With the help of Sara and many other partners, we started to look at the disproportionate rate of Black girls being overrepresented in the different systems in an inequitable way. And so not only did Sara help to create the report that highlighted the inequities of Black girls here in Allegheny County, but she was instrumental in helping us not just talk about and look at the data, but to put together an action plan and really make some change. And last year at our 10th annual Equity Summit, we highlighted a report that was, again, authored by Sara that actually talked about the progress that was made from the actions that was put forth through the work that we've done collaboratively. So I'm sure she'll talk about that in her speech, but I just wanted to say that none of the work that we have done at Gwen's Girls would have been as impactful as it has been without the support, the creativity, the thoughtfulness that Sara Goodkind has brought to our organization. We are both also alums of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Interdisciplinary Research Leaders Program, which supported our collaborative work with Dr. Brittany Brinkman in developing the Black Girls Advocacy and Leadership Alliance called Bagala. And you'll see some of our girls, Bagala girls, are here today. And part of that work talked about how young people's voices needed to be not only heard, but at the table when we are not only looking at data and research, but also the policy change that's necessary. Dr. Goodkind serves as co-president of the WSW, the advisory board for the journal Affiliate, Feminist Inquiry and Social Work, for which she was co-editor-in-chief with Drs. Mimi Kim and Jennifer Zelnick from 2000 to 2023. She also is a co-principal investigator of the Pittsburgh Wage Study, which is aimed at generating understanding to support policymakers, advocates, and employers in ensuring that all workers are paid a living wage and have safe, supportive working conditions. As I said earlier, I could go on and on about the work and achievements that Sara has done, but this right here, just a tremendous honor for her to be the first woman to hold this endowed chair position. So congratulations. Please come on now.
Thank you, Kathy, for that really wonderful introduction. It's really been a highlight of my career to collaborate with you for the past decade. So I really appreciate you being here today. And I'm excited that I have the opportunity to talk about some of our work together today. So hi, everyone. Thank you all very much for coming. This is a really meaningful moment for me. And I'm especially humbled and honored to be named to the Phil Hallen Endowed Chair because of Phil's extraordinary example of social justice leadership. As we heard from Chancellor Nordenberg, Phil Hallen worked collaboratively to support community health and made a lasting impact, not just in Pittsburgh, but well beyond. And I'm so delighted to have had the opportunity to get to know you now through this. And I really appreciate all of you being here today to join the conversation as we honor and celebrate Phil's enduring legacy. And I'm especially grateful to the young women who are part of the Black Girls Advocacy and Leadership Alliance for joining us. I'm talking today about girls' empowerment, and girls and young women should always be at the center of these conversations. Girls' empowerment is a topic I've been researching and writing about for some time, and I believe we're at a moment when its necessity and importance could not be more clear. But before I talk about the current moment, I want to start with my first entree into girls' empowerment. In the mid-1990s, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in post-communist Romania. While I was there, colleagues and I received a grant from the U.S. Democracy Commission to design and implement a girls' leadership camp, which we named Girls Leading Our World, or Camp Glow. Taking 80 girls to a mountain campsite and spending an intense week engaged in what we hoped were empowering activities was one of the best experiences I had in Romania. I'm still in touch with a number of the original Camp Glow participants, and incredibly, this camp has since been adapted and replicated around the world by Peace Corps volunteers in more than 60 countries. You can see here pictures of Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, visiting Camp Glow in Malawi, and Michelle Obama when she was First Lady, visiting Camp Glow in Liberia. In developing Camp Glow, we drew on literature and program materials designed for American girls. That was what we had in those pre-internet days. But in reflecting on these early experiences in gender-specific programming, I identified in the materials that we used assumptions made about girls that exclude some girls. And I recognized a lack of attention to the relevance of race, ethnicity, and culture. Thus, we were applying ideas about empowerment developed based on research with middle-class white American girls to girls in very different contexts. Our camp, we think, was nonetheless a positive experience for the girls who participated. And from what I know, Peace Corps volunteers since have done a good job adapting this model for their specific contexts. At the same time, I think that in our excitement to help girls, we sometimes draw uncritically on ideas and materials that have the potential to unintentionally reinforce their oppression. So that's the theme of my talk today, how well-intentioned efforts to individually empower girls risk leading them to blame themselves if they're not able to successfully surmount the socially created obstacles in their way, and what we can do instead. I will also talk about. So in other words, many of our social policies, programs, and interventions, and the rhetoric and discourse on which they're based, expect girls, especially girls who are marginalized by race, ethnicity, economic class, and other social factors, to individually empower their way out of oppression by working on or fixing themselves. Through examples from my research, I'll demonstrate how this happens, why I think it's a problem, and argue that we must challenge what I and others call the neoliberal co-optation of feminism by reclaiming empowerment and supporting girls in collective efforts towards social change. So I'll make this case by providing some brief background on the disciplines in which I work, social work and feminist studies, focusing on how the concept of empowerment is central to both of these fields. I'll then describe the neoliberal co-optation of feminism, which I and other people call commercialized feminism. And I'll use two examples from my research to demonstrate its manifestation. Next, I'll describe what I mean by redefining resilience and reframing resistance in the lives of marginalized girls, and use this discussion to make a case for what I'm calling reclaiming empowerment. And finally, I'll share the implementation and impact of the Black Girls Advocacy and Leadership Alliance, or BGALA for short, a Gwen's Girls program, which I had the opportunity to help develop, that reclaims empowerment in this way. So, what is empowerment? Clearly, there are multiple conflicting definitions. Empowerment is a concept that's central to both feminism and social work. So before I define empowerment, I want to say a couple of words about feminism and social work. There are many different understandings of feminism. I don't think anyone said it better than Bell Hooks, pictured here, who argued that feminism should not have the goal of the overthrow of men or even equality with them. Which men would we want to be equal to, she asked. But rather, as she defined it, feminism is based on the belief that our current social arrangements harm everyone, including men, and on the desire to make our world more just. You've probably heard the feminist adage, the personal is political. This is the realization that comes through consciousness raising, what legal scholar Catherine McKinnon calls the feminist method, a process in which people recognize that what seemed like individual problems are often broader social issues. In this way, feminists see individual and social change as connected. Social workers also see these as linked, or at least I think we should. Despite the fact that we separate our MSW training into micro and macro tracks, I believe that micro and macro change are inextricably linked. As Anna Chayette, former dean of the University of Georgia School of Social Work, said in a TED Talk, social workers learn how to see and understand the invisible interconnections between people and their families and their neighborhoods and their communities and society and laws and policies. Which takes me back to empowerment. The definition on which I believe social work is based was well articulated by Iris Marion Young, who Pitt was fortunate to have on faculty for a number of years, and who we continue to honor each year with the Iris Marion Young Awards for Political Engagement. She said, "The meaning of empowerment used by social service theorists is a process in which individual, relatively powerless persons engage in dialogue with each other and thereby come to understand the social sources of their powerlessness and see the possibility of acting collectively to change their social environment." Noteworthy about this definition is again how it connects individual and social change. In fact, it demonstrates how not only individual and social change connect, but also how they can't be separated. However, some versions of empowerment aimed at girls and women do focus exclusively on individual change and are, I believe, emblematic of a neoliberal co-optation of feminism. This phenomenon, described by a number of feminist scholars, is variously called commercialized feminism, choice feminism, or neoliberal feminism. It's a phenomenon that has been identified for at least 30 years. In 1996, Liz Kelly, Sheila Burton, and Linda Regan wrote, "The problem, which had no name in the 1950s, and which in the 1970s was clearly named as one of men's power and men's behavior, has, by a complicated alchemy, been transformed into women's unwillingness to use their own power and their need to increase their self-esteem." In other words, this version of feminism has inverted the feminist adage, "the personal is political," to "the political is personal," telling each woman that it is she who needs changing and that she is responsible for enacting this change. This version of feminism has resulted from the melding of neoliberal ideas about personal responsibility with feminist ideals of freedom, choice, and independence. On its surface, its message seems positive, telling girls and women that they can do anything and pushing them towards lofty goals. Gloria Steinem herself played a part in this movement with the publication of her 1992 book, Revolution from Within, in which she argued that women's lack of self-esteem contributed to a stalling of the feminist movement. Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In is a more recent example. Published 13 years ago, Sandberg calls her book a feminist manifesto and draws on feminist ideals like freedom and choice to encourage women to work towards equality by changing themselves and addressing internal obstacles. As she said in a talk on her book, "We get closer to the goal of true equality with every single one of you who leans in." Now, I'm not arguing that changing ourselves or addressing internal obstacles is a bad thing. Rather, I take issue with the implication that this is all that's needed to create gender equity. Much of my research examines social service programs and systems that work with young people, concentrating on their experiences in educational, child welfare, and juvenile legal systems, and how these systems both construct and meet the needs of the young people they serve. One place I've studied this is in juvenile justice programming for girls that was developed in response to a 1992 federal mandate that juvenile justice facilities provide gender-specific services for girls. I was interested in how these facilities were interpreting and implementing this mandate. In my research in residential programs for justice system-involved girls in Detroit, I interviewed staff and girls, examined program materials, and engaged in ethnographic observation at 2 different programs. I found commercialized feminism to be a central organizing principle of their efforts. I want to note that I didn't begin my study of the programs with the idea of examining their application of commercialized feminism. In fact, it wasn't even a concept I was familiar with. Instead, this idea emerged through my analyses of them as I discovered it was a useful way to conceptualize the messages they were imparting to the girls. So what do I mean by commercialized feminism? This is something I think we see throughout society, something that, as I was saying, has resulted from the intersection of neoliberalism with feminist ideals. It's most prominent in the self-help industry, where large sums of money are being made from people desperate to find ways to feel better about themselves. This slide is a picture and text I found through a Google search, showing how the language of individualized empowerment is used by the self-help industry. Unfortunately, however, much of the self-help industry tells people, especially girls and women, that the source of their bad feelings is their lack of confidence, independence, and failure to measure up to societal ideals, rather than questioning the ideals themselves. Thus, commercialized feminism tells each girl or woman that it is she who needs fixing and that she is responsible for fixing herself. So I want to share with you what this looked like in the gender-specific programs for justice system involved girls that I studied. The goals of these programs, as articulated by program materials, staff, and the girls themselves, were focused on developing the girls' independence, self-esteem, and choice, and in this way, empowering them. For example, in describing the program goals, one staff member said, "We teach them how to get out into the real world and be a successful woman." I asked her what that looked like, and she said, "To be successful is to be able to take care of yourself. You depend on yourself. You're not depending on anybody else." Self-esteem was identified by staff and girls as a necessary quality for achieving independence. For example, one of the programs I studied had listed in their written goals, "Youth will feel and demonstrate improved self-worth." With regard to choice, a staff member at one of the programs I studied said, "The goal of the program is to get them to realize that they have done some bad things. They have made some wrong choices. All the information that we give you," she said, "it's your responsibility to take in that information and to make the right decisions concerning your life. No matter where you live, no matter what background you come from, if you really, really want to be someone in life, do something with your life, you can do it." The materials from one of the programs nicely summed up their focus. They said, "Our program seeks to empower young women to be independent, resourceful, healthy, and productive." On their surface, these seem like worthwhile goals. However, considering the context of the programs in the girls' lives, they presented tensions, challenges, and contradictions. For example, who among us is truly independent? A wealth of research has demonstrated that people who experience life without social connection and support are prone to loneliness, depression, and even early death. Further, these programs were asking teenage girls to be independent in ways that their more affluent peers were definitely not being asked. Similarly, of course, feeling good about oneself is positive. Yet staff often attributed what were seen as the girls' poor choices to their low self-esteem. And I wonder if it's fair to blame girls for low self-esteem when society so devalues them. While it was the second wave feminist ideal that girls and women value themselves and not rely on men to demonstrate their worth, this individual valuation was meant to occur in and indeed be facilitated by a context of broader social change in which the social value of all women is enhanced. And finally, just because a person has agency to choose does not mean they have an unlimited array of options. Thus, these programs' focus on choice de-emphasizes the fact that many of the girls have had very limited options from which to choose. I know that these well-intentioned staff members were doing their best to encourage the girls with such messages. And they were often teaching the girls things that they themselves worked on in their own lives. However, justice system involved girls are disproportionately girls of color, and an overwhelming majority come from low-income backgrounds and have experienced abuse. Thus, in many ways, these programs are instructing the girls to empower their way out of poverty, abuse, and oppression. As this example demonstrates, despite its focus on empowerment, Commercialized feminism does nothing to challenge social hierarchies of gender, race, ethnicity, class, sexuality, or age, nor does it fault the unjust social conditions that contribute to these hierarchies. Instead, it often helps to make girls and women more content with, or at least accepting of, their location in these hierarchies. Because it puts a feminist face on the perpetuation of injustice and inequality, commercialized feminism is particularly dangerous, especially for girls marginalized by race, ethnicity, class, sexuality, and/or ability, as well as by gender. Although it may assist some girls, most likely those who are privileged by one or more of these statuses, the employment of commercialized feminism by media, schools, and youth-serving institutions in their attempts to help girls, in effect, serves to protect privilege and reinforce inequities. Research bears this out. In an experiment where people were shown quotes emphasizing individual female empowerment from Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, their awareness of systemic barriers decreased. This type of empowerment advice suggests that women have more control over their outcomes than they actually do, and downplays the discrimination they continue to experience, thus leading women to blame themselves when they do not succeed. Another research project I've conducted on the implementation of gender-specific programming for youth focused on a short-lived experiment with 2 single-gender academies within one Pittsburgh public high school. These single-sex classes were instituted in an attempt to boost the students' academic performance. It was believed that this would help the students' achievement in 3 ways. First, by eliminating distractions and harassment from the other sex. Second, by enabling the schools to cater to what were believed to be different learning styles of boys and girls. And third, by offering the low-income students at this school the sex-segregated learning environment typically offered to more affluent students in private single-sex schools. However, our research found that distractions at this school were not decreased. Instead, some were increased and others ignored. In addition, we found increased sexual harassment outside of class, a heightened focus on gender and sexuality, and the perpetuation of harmful racial and gender stereotypes. Further, rather than feeling privileged, students in the school associated separation by sex with juvenile justice institutions, which left them feeling blamed and punished for the low levels of proficiency on standardized achievement tests among students in their school. One of our analyses of data from this project focused on how girls were blamed for what many perceived was a boy crisis in education. As is well documented, girls and women in the US experience high levels of gender-based violence. 1 in 5 will be sexually assaulted in her lifetime, and teenage girls are at the highest risk. In one article, we focus on how commercialized feminism serves to perpetuate rape culture by promoting neoliberal conceptions of girl power that hold girls accountable, not only for their own behavior, but also for that of boys. In this article, which we called "Are My Pants Lowering Your Test Scores? Blaming Girls and Girls' Empowerment for the Boy Crisis in Education," my colleague Lena Beijing and I discuss how dress codes blame girls for distracting boys, and how the interaction of discourses of girl blame and girl power, because of how girl power is often framed in an individualized, depoliticized way, results in additional ways that girls are held responsible for boys' actions and leads girls to blame themselves for boys' harassment and assault of them. Thus, the rhetoric of girls' empowerment employed in schools and child-serving systems fuels the myth of meritocracy and supports longstanding approaches that focus on fixing kids rather than fixing society, asking girls to be resilient rather than providing needed supports and opportunities. So I'll turn now to the topic of resilience. because encouraging people to be resilient is a way we blame people for their own oppression and a way that we ignore and reinforce social inequality. In our society, we applaud the resilience of those who succeed despite the odds, but too rarely question why the odds are so bad for members of marginalized groups. In fact, social mobility in the US is decreasing, meaning that these odds keep getting worse. Recent research has revealed a serious toll on the health of those who have resilient characteristics and strive within contexts where they do not have the same opportunities as others, even when they do manage to succeed. These negative health effects are found especially among Black people in the US, including among Black adolescents, which researchers connect with the fact that the US has such high levels of racism and racial inequality. Redefining resilience is part of the name of the community engaged research project that I'll be describing shortly, which, as you heard before, is a collaborative effort with Dr. Elliott, Gwen's Girls, and the Black Girls Equity Alliance. The other part of the name and also part of the title of my talk today is Reframing Resistance. So to explain why we chose this title, I need to tell you just a little bit about the Black Girls Equity Alliance. You heard a little bit from Dr. Elliott, but the Black Girls Equity Alliance is convened by Dr. Elliott and Gwen's Girls, and it's a countywide coalition of social workers, youth serving system professionals, attorneys, researchers, advocates, funders, activists, parents, youth, and other community members who came together in 2016 to understand and address systemic inequities affecting Black girls in Allegheny County. One of the most glaring inequities we encountered as we began this work was the disproportionate referral of Black girls to the legal system. So I'm actually not going to share any specific quantitative data in my talk today, though we have a lot of it, as Kathy mentioned. And a lot of the data is in these reports produced by the Black Girls Equity Alliance over the past decade, all of which are on the website. But what I will tell you is that we looked at self-report data from a representative sample of girls in our county, which revealed that these disparate referral rates could not be explained by differences in the behaviors for which girls could be referred to the juvenile legal system. So we worked together to understand what could explain these differences. What we learned aligns with research by Monique Morris, Kimberly Crenshaw, Jamelia Blake, and others, which documents how we criminalize Black girls' victimization, survival strategies, and resistance to injustice. As Monique Morris demonstrates in her book, Push Out, pictured here, often when girls, especially Black girls, are disciplined at school for disruptive behavior or fighting, it's because they're defending themselves from harassment or assault. A national survey of 8th through 11th graders found that 2/3 of Black girls and over half of white girls had been touched, grabbed, or pinched in a sexual way in their schools. Girls of all races experience harassment and assault, but adults respond differently to different girls. Recent research highlights what's called the adultification of Black girls. Researchers found that adults see Black girls as less innocent and less in need of protection than white girls of the same age. This phenomenon of being disciplined for acts of self-defense is well illustrated with the experience of a 10th grade Black girl here in Pittsburgh who was attending a Pittsburgh public school. A boy in her class was touching her sexually, and she asked the teacher for help. The teacher did nothing to stop the boy's behavior, so the girl stabbed him with her pencil. The school district expelled her for a full year under the mandatory zero tolerance weapons possession policy. The Education Law Center took her case and managed to have her expulsion overturned. However, the appeal was not based on the fact that she was forced to defend herself when she was denied the help that she requested, but rather on the fact that labeling a pencil a weapon might require that all kids be expelled. As this example makes clear, Black girls' so-called delinquent behaviors are sometimes attempts to protect themselves from harassment and abuse, and they are also at times expressions of frustration with adults who mistreat or dismiss them, or with a lack of resources and opportunities. Thus, the way we deal with Black girls' behaviors in schools frequently punishes them for their own victimization and at times criminalizes their survival strategies. They experience institutionalized racism and sexism that discounts their experiences, devalues their lives, and disregards their suffering. Despite these experiences, many Black girls and women are thriving and making enormous contributions to our society. Yet Black girls and women should not be forced to be resilient in these ways. This is why I believe we need to redefine resilience and reframe resistance, to understand that when marginalized youth seem angry, it's often because they have good reason and because society is not providing them with the same protection and support given to more privileged youth. As this discussion reveals, Black girls in the US experience a double bind. Striving in the context of racism and oppression has harmful health consequences. Yet when they resist this oppression, their behaviors are often pathologized and criminalized. The Black Girls Advocacy and Leadership Alliance is a program that Dr. Kathy Elliott, Dr. Brittany Brinkman, and I developed as a potential means to escape this double bind via empowerment programming for Black girls that, through the empowerment process, aims to channel their justified resistance to oppression into collective action, challenging societal inequities, and thus promoting their collective rather than individual resilience. Launched by Gwen's Girls in 2018, the Black Girls Advocacy and Leadership Alliance is an after-school program designed to involve girls as leaders in advocacy efforts, focused on addressing the systemic inequities they face. Grounded in Black feminist praxis, girls are mentored and supported as researchers and change agents via an empowerment process involving the collective development of critical consciousness and collaborative efforts to affect policy change. The theory behind it is that not only is this an effective way to create needed social change, but also that by involvement in a program that helps them to identify and challenge societal obstacles and injustices, the girls will move away from blaming themselves for the challenges they face, which will therefore help to promote their physical and mental health. The first year of Begala was 2018 to 2019. 15 girls participated throughout the school year in programming led by graduate students from Pitt, Point Park, and Chatham. And Gwen's Girls has continued to run Begala since. Our evaluation of Begala that first year found significant changes in measures related to the collective resilience promoted by the empowerment model. Specifically, there was an increase in perceptions of societal inequity and a decrease in adherence to neoliberal ideas that disregard systemic challenges, thus demonstrating the development of critical consciousness among the participating girls. Through their participation in the program, girls critically reflected on their experiences of oppression, developed mutual support and positive gendered racial identity, and engaged in collective action. In this way, our research demonstrates the utility of this empowerment model in challenging neoliberal, individualized models of resilience and reframing Black girls' resistance to injustice as an alternative collective form of resilience. Given the mounting evidence of the harmful health effects of behavior that are defined as individually resilient among people experiencing oppression, redefining resilience collectively and promoting it through empowerment interventions for Black girls and other youth is both promising and necessary. Our findings help us understand the mechanisms by which an empowerment approach can reduce inequities and provide empirical evidence of the impact of participatory approaches that shift the focus from fixing girls to engaging girls in fixing society. We believe this could not come at a better time, as it seems clear that any meaningful empowerment of girls and women will require social and political change. Individual girls and women leaning in will not be enough. So in conclusion, the Black Girls Advocacy and Leadership Alliance challenges the rhetoric that asks marginalized girls to be resilient in the face of oppression and reframes their resistance to injustice. In this way, it's helping to reclaim empowerment from the individualized, depoliticized version enabled by commercialized feminism, instead demonstrating the power and effectiveness of a version that engages girls in consciousness raising and collective action to address the systemic inequities they face. And this year, the Bagala girls are engaging in training in data literacy and research so that they can collaborate with our Pitt research team on an evaluation of Caring Connections for Youth, a community-led pre-arrest diversion initiative developed by Gwen's Girls out of the collaborative work of the Black Girls Equity Alliance. Caring Connections is designed to address racial disproportionality in referrals of young people to the legal system by offering an alternative to calling 911 to adults who see young people struggling or in conflict, and by providing youth and their families with resources and support. And if you want to learn more about Caring Connections, we can definitely talk about that in the QA. So there's more that I could say about all of those things. And thank you so much for your attention as I talked for so long. I just want to end here. I want to acknowledge some of my mentors, funders, and collaborators who have supported these 30 plus years of girls' empowerment research and collective action. So this isn't everyone, just those involved in the projects I discussed today. But I want to thank you all again for coming. And Dr. Elliott and the Bagala girls are here, so we're excited to have a few minutes for some question, answer, discussion. I think that this one. Are there any questions? Right up here.
Maybe girls? Yeah. Hold on, I know one of them gotta go to the bathroom. So lady from the guy, please stand up and introduce yourself. Tell them who you are, what school you go to.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm Amora Tella and I go to Brashear High School.
And she's a senior.
I'm Tabby. I'm in 9th grade and I go to, wait, what do you want me to say? Oh yeah, and I go to Amani.
Hi, my name is Kiori and I go to Brashear.
She's a senior too.
My name's Denasia. I go to Older Guys and I'm a senior.
And the last girl that had to go to the bathroom is Naraya. And she goes to Westinghouse and she's a 10th grader. Any other questions?
Have a present. Just give me that.
Or you can hold this one, whichever you wish.
First of all, I want to thank Mark Nordenberg for giving a preview to my eulogy. Yes, I keep asking him, will he please do my funeral when the time comes? Also, I want to say to Kathy Elliott that I'm tempted to tell the story of your mother's.
I knew it.
First arrest. Her first arrest. Shall I tell that story?
Yeah.
many of you know Gwen's Girls was started by Kathy's mother, who was the first Black woman police officer in Pittsburgh many years ago, 40, 50 years ago now, right? Her first arrest, the reason that she became famous was that she was on patrol one evening with, I suppose, a white male cop. They were called to a burglary in a mall somewhere in Monroeville, a strip mall. It had a front door and a rear door. The rear door was in the back where the garbage was taken out. And she was told to go around the back and that the police officer would enter the building, and she was to make sure that he was not to escape through the back door. Gwen went to her post and was standing there amidst the debris and the garbage in the back of the store. And suddenly a large black rat ran across her foot. She shrieked at the top of her lungs. And the perpetrator went directly out the front door into the arms of the waiting cop. She, however, was credited with the arrest. But the point of partly was this is this that Gwen had this vision that was carried out by you and your colleagues, and which we've seen come into fruition here with the with this group of women and with this appointment. And I was reminded that there were grandparents and parents and others who went through much of this. It was not described as beautifully and scientifically as it was just now. But the problem was there. We didn't know much about it. And what we saw from time to time were expressions that gave us some hope that there would be a different future. And many years ago, 50, 60 years ago, I was an administrator of a clinic in the south end of Boston, which dealt with immigrant populations. There was the population of single parent families was enormous at that time for very different reasons, because the men stayed home, the women were sent to stay with relatives. So there was a similar kind of a need for understanding of girls and women in that society, which was totally untouched, of course. And these people came for help to not the Gwen's Girls, not to your program, not to a social work school, but they came to the only thing that was available at the time, which is a medical clinic, which Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes was one of the physicians. So you can imagine what the mental health aspects of this interchange were. They're zero. However, there was something that was in the air, and I found this photograph in the institution where I was the administrator, and it struck me as being having some kind of core about what we were talking about today, whether it's women and girls, whether it's LGBT issues, whether it's racism. Something in this photograph touched me, and I've kept this for 60 years on my various walls in various offices. And I thought, well, Kathy and I are in a big de-accessioning mode now. So maybe this should go somewhere else. So I'm going to give this to Sara. You can see it a little bit. It's a very old print. It was printed in 1880. It's a mother with three little boys, two little boys and I guess it's a little girl on her lap. but it represents such a kind of a sense of future and hope that I felt it needed to be on my walls and someone else's walls. So I put this on the back for you. This photograph is an early gelatin print, which was taken in 1890 at the Boston Dispensary, the outpatient clinic of the Tufts Medical Center. I was an assistant administrator for outpatient services at the time. The clinic was the second oldest medical care facility in the country. So we're talking a huge sweep of history here, similar with the feelings that you have been, that have been expressed here are just coming out, coming through, in this case, through button shoes, high button shoes, but nevertheless, the soul was there. It's been on my office walls throughout my career in healthcare, reminding me of the understanding we must practice in doing our work with the underserved. This immigrant mother, exuding love and care, brings hope of a new future for her children. The times and the people are different, but the urgency of this kindness is what's needed now more than ever and has not changed. So here's, it's from my wall to your wall.
Wow. Really beautiful. Thank you. So I don't know if there are any, I mean, we didn't have a lot of questions or discussion, but we certainly could, or any of them.
It kind of feels like it's impossible to top that, I have to say. And so I'm wondering if what makes more sense, rather than trying to do a formal question and answer, is to let us enjoy some food, to let us gather and have conversations with Sara. I don't know about all of you, but when I hear Sara talk about these things, the idea of flipping the paradigm, the idea of thinking about what are the systemic problems, what are the ways that we are forcing people to internalize the systemic oppression and the problems of our society into themselves. And I have to say, listening to this week with all that has been discussed in the news recently was particularly difficult and particularly important to recognize how much work needs to be done in our society. And I really thank Sara and Kathy and you guys and all of the folks out there, all of us who are doing this work to try to figure out how do we continue. I think the legacy that Phil has embodied so amazingly well for a very long time, and that it's our responsibility to continue working with him, working beyond what we can do at the moment, and thinking about how do we advance not only the interventions and the ways that we work with the world, but the ways that we think about that. And I think that's what's so critical in what Sara presented today is don't just take what's given to you and say, we can tweak this, but how do you think about it in the most critical way? How do you flip the paradigm to say, how do we really get at the real problems? And how do we get past the bullshit of all of the trivial things that we might think about in the world to the actual issues that we need to be working with? So I thank you all so much for coming. Phil, I thank you so much for envisioning the world that you did envision and for allowing us to continue to live in that and to take this endowed chair, pass it back and forth between social work and public health, which kind of symbolically links us and practically links us forever to do the work that needs to be done, for joining us today, and for all of you for celebrating, and I hope for going away feeling like this is our collective responsibility. You can't just come, you can't just listen, you gotta actually do the work. So thank you. Food's over here. Everybody can hang around and mingle and chat. I'm sure Sara would like to ask questions or answer questions and ask questions. And I'm sure the rest of us would just love to chat for a while. So please stay as long as you'd like. And thank you so much.
I know. Yeah, I see.
Really good.